So next we've got one of our guest speakers, Dr. Maung Zarni. Dr. Zarni is a Burmese scholar, educator and human rights activist. He's co-authored a number of books on the genocide of Myanmar's Rohingya. He is a co-founder of Forces of Renewal South Asia and a fellow at the Genocide Documentation Centre, Cambodia. He'll talk in particular about the judges at the People's Permanent Tribunal on Sri Lanka. And he will talk on the topic, parallels between the genocides in Sri Lanka and Cambodia, and ways forward in seeking justice. Everyone give a warm welcome to Dr. Zarni.
Good evening. Before I say anything, I want to ask all of us to observe 1 minute silence, because we cannot talk about human rights without honoring and remembering the people, human rights defenders, innocent children, women, men, elderly people, wherever they may be, whatever their religious, ethnic, national identity, who have paid with their lives for something that we are trying to celebrate and advance. So just 1 minute to think of anyone who has been, or any community who has been wronged. Thank you. I'm very honored to be invited to share my thoughts on genocides that took place in Cambodia and the genocide that is taking place as we gather today in my country of birth, Burma, or now known as Myanmar. As many of you will probably notice in the media, online or on television, that one-time human rights icon and 1991 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, the woman who made her home, who made Britain her home for over 2 decades, mothered 2 British and Burmese children, educated in this country, widely held as the Nelson Mandela of Asia. Just last week in The Hague, she stood at the podium as Madame Agent, defending the indefensible, denying, dismissing the country's ongoing human genocide of 4 decades against the Rohingya Muslim community. That has been part of our country since its birth in 1948 at the end of the Second World War. I was there in The Hague at the ICT, not at the gallery, where she and other important individuals were. I was with a few Rohingya activists, Burmese monks and others who are on the other side of the equation, supporting Aung San Suu Kyi. But we were sitting in the same room, a small courtroom, where we were given a huge flat screen to watch. We could, during the coffee break, we could we could see the people like Aung San Suu Kyi and the Gambia Legal Council diplomats coming over for coffee, but we were on this side. What I want to talk about is this. Human rights is not simply a principle on paper. As you know, in 1948, December 10th, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. And that document was supposed to be the guiding human value statement. 3 years after the closure of Auschwitz in early 1945. And that document remains, for many states and governments, something that they pay lip service to. And that includes 5 guardians of our post-Second World War world order. 5 permanent members of the Security Council. These are member states, leading member states, that have been entrusted with the task to ensure that peace, stability prevails in the world since the Holocaust ended. Paradoxically, to me personally, most outrageously, these are also the world's largest merchants of debt. They produce the largest quantities of arms, and they market, they sell what they produce to any country that will pay. That includes Saudi Arabia, that includes my own country of Myanmar, that includes Sri Lanka, which has brutally ended politically motivated military conflict in Sri Lanka. In 2013, I was one of the 11 members of the panel of jury that for about a week combed through piles of documents pertaining to what Elam Tamil people have done to resist the internally colonial state of Sri Lanka. And in December 2013, 11 of us, I was the only and youngest member of the panel among very distinguished group of people from around the world, including genocide scholars, lawyers, people who co-founded the World Social Forum and whatnot, legal scholars. We found that the predominantly Buddhist state of Sri Lanka that has been in the hands of Sinhalese Buddhist nationalists have commissioned the crime of genocide against Elam Tamil people. It's one thing fighting terrorism. It's another thing destroying entire communities. Mass raping women and girls. Killing surrendered fighters. Extrajudicial killings. So I know that a lot of Elam Tamil supporters and members of the Tamil community wanted the recognition. What they suffer is not simply war crimes. What they suffer is a full-fledged genocidal policy at the hands of Sri Lankan government. I was raised a Buddhist. I am Burmese Buddhist. I came from a traditional Buddhist family in the old town the last capital of our country, the old Burmese kingdom, known as Mandalay. Some of you old enough to know the poem by Rudyard Kipling, On the Road to Mandalay. He wrote the poem having never set his foot in my hometown. But nevertheless, as a Burmese Buddhist, I see a parallel between what the Tamil, predominantly Hindu people, suffer at the hands of Sri Lanka and the predominantly Buddhist state and Buddhist Sinhalese society, and what the Rohingya Muslims have been suffering over the last 4 decades in Western Burma, immediately next to the predominantly Muslim state of Bangladesh. So my family has served in the Burmese Armed Forces since its inception in 1942 under the fascist patronage of Japanese naval intelligence. The army was created with the support of popular Burmese public, with the popular support of the Burmese, who longed to expel, either peacefully or by armed struggle, the British colonial rule that had been in the country by 1942, over 100 years. And yet, the very same army became the sole instrument of genocide. And here, I want to say a word about genocide. When people use the word genocide, non-genocide scholars, journalists, other professionals, credentialed classes, doctors, engineers, teachers, and general public, we come to think of, or we immediately think of Nazi Germany and the genocide, the Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, some of the gas chambers or crematoriums, they were burning or incinerating gas victims, about 2,000 every 25 minutes. So of course at Auschwitz, almost 1 million majority Jewish victims, Roma, or in the old racist terminology, gypsies, several thousands of them, Sinti, Poles, Russians, they were all gassed. So we want to see the numbers. We want to, lawyers would keep saying, 10,000. I heard with my own ears, just on Wednesday, the lead counsel for Burma or Myanmar, in the presence of Aung San Suu Kyi, the counsel, the Canadian lawyer, a well-known genocide scholar by the name of William Shabazz, said 10,000 people. That was the figure that United Nations independent fact-finding mission came up with as the number of victims that were slaughtered in a span of several weeks. But we're talking about a genocide that my wife and I call the slow burning genocide. We published a 3-year study about 4 or 5 years before anyone called this a genocide. We're talking about like 4 decades of institutionalized destruction of a particular group, a population, with their own distinct ethnic, cultural, linguistic, religious identity. I think the Tamil people also suffer a similar fate at the hands of Sri Lankan Sinhalese state or government. One parallel that I noticed, if you're not Buddhist Burmese, which I am in my country, You are not. You may be entitled to nominal human rights and nominal equal citizenship, but you're not really a part of that national community. You are second class. I think a lot of Tamil people can relate to it, because in the old days, in the old pre-modern kingdoms, it was simply the power of the throne that decides or decided what privileges or what protections you're going to get. As long as you sold arms to a court of power in Asia, doesn't matter whether you're Portuguese or Dutch, you were given privileges. You were protected by the king. The king was interested in the preservation of his power. But fast forward post Second World War, or even before the colonial states, one thing that all colonial states have in common is a racially organized societies and political systems. The idea of minorities, in the most ironic sense, refer to the white colonial minority in the colonial context, where a few Oxford or Cambridge trained, or maybe Sorbonne trained, if it is a French colonial entity, they control, a small minority controlled a vast majority. That was a minority. And today, when we say minority, we're talking about national minorities that the United Nations considered protected groups. And so what we have in this post-World War II political order around the world is the legacy of colonial systems where race and ethnicity were fixed in stone, and communities were grouped along these redefined entities. We call that racial identity or ethnic identity. And so, for many communities in places like Sri Lanka or in my own country, independence simply means release from the clutch of white men's colonial, racist, exploitative rule to the nationalist Brahmins, similarly exploitative, similarly racist, similarly colonial rule. So that is why we see the rebellion from amongst the Tamil community. Wherever there is repression, oppression, exploitation, there will always be resistance. This is not rocket science. This is empirical history. Look around. We were not born to be enslaved or oppressed by anybody, whether man or woman. So, how much time? 5 minutes. So what we have is post-independence, internally colonial states where dominant religious group, be they Theravada Buddhist, as in the case of Sri Lanka and Burma, or Hindu fundamentalists in the case of Modi's India today. As you're aware, because we are on the subject of genocide, forget the past for a moment. Forget what happened in Cambodia in the mid-1970s, where a third of the population was wiped out by this totalitarian, murderous communist regime led by Pol Pot. In our contemporary world today, there are textbook examples of genocides unfolding in my country, And there are also cases where if you are students of genocide and mass atrocity, where you will recognize early phases or stages of genocide. In the case of Uyghur Muslims of Turkish origin in Central or close to Central Asia, in China, or in the case of Assamese Muslims, a few millions in northeast India, where Modi and his BJP fundamentalist government that want to make India safe and prosperous only for Hindus. Assamese Muslims, about 2 million, have been struck off national registry on the pretext that they were really from former East Pakistan or today's Bangladesh that became independent in 1971 with the military intervention by the India's Indira government when West Pakistan brutally invaded their own national brother over linguistic nationalism, power sharing. And then in the case of Uyghurs, they have been in the news. We don't need to, go into detail. They've been in so-called re-education or vocational training camps where they cannot leave barbed wire camps under watch with surveillance or CCTV cameras, with guards standing over them with submachine guns. Genocide, I think that the last thought I want to share with you. Genocides are not simply about killing 1 million people at the rate of 2,000 per half an hour. Genocide simply means intentional attempt to destroy. The key word is destroy. We can be destroyed physically, as in our bodies, or mentally. Intentional attempt to wipe out, to destroy a human community that has its own ethnic, racial, religious, and national identity, either in whole or in part. You don't need to show that every single one of the Tamil community has been wiped out. Therefore, it is genocide. If you lost 100,000 families over the last 30 years as the direct result of the policies of Colombo, you are in the realm where it is no longer far-fetched to use the word genocide. So finally, on human rights and genocide, if you fight for human rights, genocides are considered the most heinous crime. And human rights is not simply something that we pay or policymakers pay lip service to. The truth is, only humans respect human rights. And so we need to ask the humanity. You need to question the humanity of those who run our world when their policies and practices, whether corporations or governments or UN bodies like UNHCR, continue to trample on the most sacred principle that emerged out of this never-again phenomenon. And we have seen and witnessed so many atrocities repeating themselves. And we must, as fellow humans, this is not a frivolous talk. Our primary identity is human, not Tamil, not Burmese, not Christian, We must band together because power is not about humanity. Power is about